I'm trying to beat Baldur's Gate 3's hardest difficulty without picking up or using a single item. That means no armor, weapons, potions, scrolls, coins, or anything you have to pick up to use. The only exceptions are the mysterious artifact and camp clothes, so I don't get demonetized. Well, when I get monetized.
If for whatever reason I pick up an item willingly, then my next challenge in Baldur's Gate 3 has to be me solo.
Hope you enjoy Baldur's Gate 3 Tactician Itemless. Let's start with the rules. The first and most important rule is you cannot pick up any items from another character's inventory, the ground, or anything. Cutscenes that force us into an item are okay, because the Astral Prism cutscene gives us the Trio Netherstone and there's no way around it. For the record, this rule only applies to the Netherstone cutscenes, where we must be forced into getting them, never by manually picking them up. If this gives us an item that comes with it, that's okay, but I'll try to avoid it whenever possible. For other items, I cannot receive it willingly or unwillingly, which poses some interesting challenges that will come up later in the video. Other creatures we summon or control can have items, as this would soft lock us at the end of the game if we added that as a new rule. And the rule of no items only applies to our 4 party members.
I named my character Itemless and made him a half-orc monk for that extra damage on critical hits and a free death ward once per long rest.
Nice.
I started the game, dropped all my items, grabbed Us, and beat some imps to death with my fist and Us's claws. Then we ran into our first problem. Shadowheart is trapped in a lithid pond, but that requires an Eldritch Rune, so I cannot free her. Bye, Shadowheart. I saved scum the Nautiloid fight about 1,000,000 times till I killed Commander Zalk and the Mind Flayer, and the Nautiloid crashing got our party to level 2. I recruited Shadowheart and Gale, killed a Mind Flayer, but our first challenge was the 3 Intellect Devourers in the wreck of the Nautiloid. Because I have no items, that means my AC is pathetic, but it is so much worse for my companions who do not have armor defense.
This is not okay.
And we barely survived that fight. I grabbed Astarion and had him put a level in Druid as he would need it later. It was at this point that I realized just how hard this challenge would be. No items means no quest items, which means I can't help Karlach with her quest or partake in any other quest that requires an item to be picked up. But this also means no camp supplies, which means I can never full long rest. No Revivify scrolls means if a companion dies, I can't revive them. And no gold means I can't respec, get a hireling, or bring back a character with withers. So this itemless challenge is also a deathless and restless challenge, which makes it so much harder. I can use spells as long as it's not from an item. So Astarion was basically useless, for now. I headed over and I freed Lae'zel from her 2 tiefling captors, and headed over to the ruins, killing the bandits outside. But this next fight would be super hard. But by simply having one character out of combat open the door, a character cast Firebolt, and then closing the door. Because they couldn't get in or destroy the door, we eventually eliminated all of them before we arrived at a much more powerful enemy. This door. I cannot open it without picking up an item, the key. And I need the 80 XP I can get from going in there. I would somehow need to find an item on the ground to get the door open. I broke open a chest in the crypt, and inside was a single smoke powder bomb. I had the idea to drag the bomb from the crypt over and over again to the door, which is okay because I never picked it up. This will be important in Act 2. A firebolt at the bomb destroyed the door, and this fight was incredibly easy given the only melee damage I could deal was twice as effective. After finding withers, we reached level 3. I chose Open Hand Monk for Itemless, obviously. I gave Gale the Knock spell, and gave Shadowheart Prayer of Healing, a major part of the run. Because partial resting only restores up to half max health in spell slots, and Shadowheart cannot ever become a life cleric, I desperately needed to conserve any spell slots as possible. Prayer of Healing is actually helpful here, as it restores a large amount of health provided it's outside of combat. I tried not to trigger the Grow fight, but Shadowheart and Gale got spotted, which forced a fight. After the battle was over, we proceeded into the Grove. But there are other problems with no items. This means I can't trade with vendors or complete any quest that gives my characters a reward. None of my 4 party members can use any items, which means I need to complete a large number of quests that don't involve items. Because I needed as much XP as possible, I went around slaughtering goblins, ogres, and eventually I headed toward the swamp to complete the Kaga quest. That's when I found the best strat in the game so far. Being a Pact of the Chain Warlock, because Pact of the Blade is useless, Will can summon an imp that can turn invisible. Attacking hostile enemies while invisible surprises all of them, giving us an extra round to attack or deal damage. So I waited until the Mephits weren't looking, then had the imp attack invisibly, so the rest of the party could sneak up and eliminate the Mephits one by one. The wood roads were much harder, except they kept entangling and setting themselves on fire. I read Kaga's note without picking it up, and went off to confront her.
I headed to camp, and then I ran into my first problem. And this is actually the reason why I picked the Dark Urge origin. If you don't, you're forced into getting an item in Act 3. But since the rules state any item I have to pick up willingly, or trigger willingly, counts as an item, I can interact with Scalaritas Fell and get the Deathbringer's Legacy. Unfortunately, it's an item, so I can't use it. I immediately throw it away.
I elected purposefully not to try to convince Kaga, so I could still get the XP from killing her. The first time went about as well as expected, but the second time I killed her and the Shadow Druids much easier. Then I headed along the Risen Road to recruit Karlach, kill some gnolls, and not interact with the Flynn, so I could force him to pick up a tadpole. After 6 hours of grinding, I reached level 5. My monk got extra attack, Gale got invisibility and fireball, and Will got Hunger for Dar. Note that I'm not actually showing the level up screens, because if you don't have any armor on, the level up screen just shows you in your underwear, and I don't want to risk being demonetized. The most important spell of Act 1 was easily Hunger of Hadar for me. Deals damage at the start and end of an enemy's turn, blinds them, and makes their speed decrease. So I headed to the goblin camp to take down their leaders. Because I wanted the extra XP, I sided with Minthara, waited until she left, and then killed every other goblin, as well as the other leaders, over a series of partial rests. The first rest, however, automatically restored all spell slots and abilities, as well as health, because the Dream Guardian showed up. Once I had killed all the goblins, I elected to take on Auntie Ethel before the grove. I made sure to kill her red caps first, as well as the rest of her minions, and because I can't use her hair, the plan was to knock her into the chasm. The first time I tried this was awful because Mayrina spotted me. I tried casting Darkness on Mayrina, but that didn't work either. So I tried it from farther away, and it worked. I snuck Gale behind the hag and blasted her into the chasm.
12 seconds later.
Because that had taken 30 minutes, and I was just sick of it, I killed Mayrina too. Sorry not sorry. I prepared for a massive battle against the oncoming horde of goblins and spiders. Since I was siding with the tieflings, I had the idea to drag a few oil barrels together to chuck them at the enemies. I didn't actually know that they were too heavy for me to throw. Then I sounded the horn. I sided against Minthara and had a big problem. The spiders, which almost always go first and have a massive attack and damage set, annihilate whoever they jump to. To make matters worse, the ogres started chucking barrels at us with goblins inside. Will's Hunger of Hadar came in clutch, and a cloud of daggers from Gale kept the warriors back. Unfortunately, one of the sappers got close enough to the gate and self-detonated, destroying it. It was just the party, Zevlor, and Asherak against a dozen enemies. It took so long, but we slowly whittled down the attackers until it was just Minthara, and then I knocked her out so I could recruit her later. Zevlor thanked us and offered to celebrate, which I was hella down for. If you return to the grove after confronting the leaders, Zevlor rewards you with items, which would fail the challenge, explaining why I needed to raid the grove. Or just double-cross Minthara, so Zevlor doesn't give us a reward, but we can still get the nice party afterwards. After some hard partying, Halsin joined our camp, and we take on the Zendrum thieves and the Flaming Fists. Hunger of Hadar, followed by a Crown of Madness, and they just slowly died to it. I killed Councillor Floric for the 150 XP, and a smoke powder explosion after gathering all the Zents up with Meow took out the first group. After eliminating the second group, I entered the Underdark. I really didn't want to enter the Underdark through the Goblin camp as it triggers Raphael, and I needed the cutscene to not trigger. A knock spell on the lift allowed me to enter the Underdark, where I battled 2 Minotaurs before entering the Myconid colony. I grabbed Sovereign Glut and reanimated a Minotaur. I proceeded to use surprise strats with the Imp to quickly take out all the Hook Horrors and their Drop Master. Eventually, my next target was Boulette. I can never surprise this guy. So my plan B was using Stunning Strike to try to rob him of Deadly Leap, which can easily destroy us. The first time it worked, but on the second time he saved, and the boulette was so low. If he ran away from this would all be for nothing. But for some reason the boulette just skipped his turn, and we defeated him before he could dip out. We reanimated it with Sovereign Glut, and then annihilated everyone, including the Myconids and Sovereign Spa, because of an accident. Apparently the boulette used Deadly Leap to get to me, and crushed a Myconid by doing so, which caused all of them besides Glut to attack us. But we slowly took them all out. Then, after I'd done everything in the Underdark fights besides the Arcane Tower, including Bual, I betrayed Glut and killed him and the boulette before it gave me the Gloves of Permafrost because that would end the challenge. I partial rested and then proceeded across the Dark Lake where I miserably failed to push Corsair Greymon into the water. This is where Eldritch Blast came in clutch. Repelling Blast from Will knocked all of the ranged guys off the boat, and then Itemless used Fury of Blows push to knock another one off. Now some of the archers did get a few good hits on Gale and Shadowheart, but we knocked all of the Dwargar off the boat, pirate style.
That's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen. So it would seem.
After arriving at Grimforge, I started by taking out all the Dwargar. I know I couldn't beat Nier and his goons alone, so I elected to side with Elder Brithvar and the other rebels, before trying to take out every Dwargar possible, excluding the ones in the main room. And I was faced with yet another obstacle, the cave-in. Without the rune powder or smoke powder bombs, I could not blast it open. I tried everything. But then I realized there are 2 smoke powder satchels not far in a secret room that I do have access to. But I couldn't pick it up, so I was forced to drag it slowly across the ground. You might say, legendary, but that's an item! You see, so long as it never enters my inventory, that's not an item, and I don't fail the challenge. There's a reason for this, in Act 2, if you guys like the video, that is. This took 30 minutes, but finally we blew up the rebel with Firebolt and freed True Soul Nier, which got us to level 6. I positioned everyone but Itemless on high ground, a decision I would later come to regret. I needed the slaves alive, and if I didn't destroy the Scrying Eye, I wouldn't do the fight alone. But Brithvar and the rebels are going to do most of the work for me. There was a slight problem. If Brithvar dies and the rebels win, a rebel named Kirgrath will show up and give us our reward. The problem is that this reward would be an item, and it would end the challenge. If Brithvar survived, he would also give us that item, which means I'd have to kill Nier and the rebels and make sure that Kirgrath dies before he can give us our reward. Level 6 gave Itemless extra damage passives, which I perpetually set to Radiant for an average of 4 extra damage. While I was in the cutscene with Kirgrath, I attacked him, but I forgot that there were 4 enemies as the 2 stonemasons showed up mid-fight against Nier. Will used Hunger of Hadar and blasted Kirgrath into the lava, but he wasn't my biggest threat. Thud, the barbarian, survived, and he is tanky as hell. All of my party members were low on health, and I actually TPK'd my first time. But on the second try, I finished the fight barely alive. After a few extra Grimforge fights, because I couldn't do the Grim fight because it requires I pick up Mithril, I headed to the mountain pass, where Raphael visited me at my camp. I leveled up Astarion and wild-shaped him into a deep Rothe. Because he's unable to speak, we used the old Raphael exploit to get 1,400 XP from knocking him out by constantly attacking him, which took about 30 minutes. It's time to confront Rosymorn Monastery and the Githyanki Kresh. I elected to avoid the Death Shepherd fight and went to take on the Gormishkas. I used Hunger of Hadar to start the fight, but one thing I didn't consider was that Hunger of Hadar extends and affects enemies above it and below it. And below the Gormishkas was a gang of drunk kobolds, which also joined the combat. This wasn't a problem, as almost all of them rushed to the highest platform, closest to where they could get me, which was in the Hunger of Hadar. The Gormishkas weren't going anywhere, until a magic effect made one a panther that leaped to us. Will Eldritch blasted him down onto the walkway. The other Gormishkas were gone, so I jumped into the monastery to get the Grimish panther to go after the kobolds. But something else happened. The remaining 6 kobolds ran into the hall and aggroed the Githyanki interrogating the cultists, which triggered a fight that took forever, making this a 4-way fight. I defeated the eagles on the rooftop and then proceeded into the Kresh. I disguised Shadowheart as a Githyanki to reach the crash, and then try to get my tadpole removed. Because I succeeded on the checks with the Zaithisk, this gave me the Awakened buff, which makes all my Lithid powers, I don't have any yet, work as a bonus action. You'll see why in Act 2. I then proceeded to take out all the Gith in the crash, partial resting between basically every fight. Then I performed a little exploit. By dismissing one of my companions outside the Kithrak's office, the companion walks into the office and triggers a cutscene. But because the companion disappears to camp, the 6 Gith that leave it afterwards stay and can be killed. So I spammed crowd control, Hunger of Hadar, and they slowly start to fall one by one. But then I discovered the real enemy. One that I could never beat. This barrier. Normally, it is lowered by inserting the Gith Shard, but that's an item which would fail the challenge. We tried everything. Teleporting to the other side, summoning allies on the other side, trying to damage the energy crystal, but nothing worked. So I guess Lae'zel will never support Orpheus, and will never see Kithrak Voss. And without items, would have made that fight against the Inquisitor hell. I had Gale cast invisibility on me, and I snuck past the Death Shepherd fight to reach the entrance to Act 2.
The literal second I reached Act 2, I ran into my first problem, the Shadow Curse. It requires a torch to survive, and that's an item. So I decided to dismiss my other companions and drag a lit torch all the way to the camp. I wanted to try something new this time, so I sided with the Dryder so he could take us safely to Moonrise. We were ambushed on the way by some petty harpers, and decimated them in one turn. And then the Dryder proceeded to take us directly to Moonrise. I completely forgot that Shadowheart's immune to the lesser effects of the Shadow Curse, but don't worry about that. The Dryder took us to Moonrise, where I recruited and saved Minthara. I put all of her future levels into Sorcerer to make her a ranged damage dealer.
Right.
But then I realized I was permanently stuck in Act 2, as I would receive a backpack from Halsin and Minthara, because they wouldn't come back with me. You might be wondering, why not just kill Karnas and use his Moon Lantern? I was under the impression that if I got the Moon Lantern from Balthazar's chamber, that instead of picking it up, I could drag it along the ground to have it active. But it doesn't work until someone picks it up. So I needed to kill Karnas and take his lantern, which was already active. I was only level 7, so I came up with an idea to get XP. Before inevitably facing the Dryder and the Necromites to get the only Moon Lantern that worked, I had Will summon a cat with the Find Familiar spell. Then I positioned all of my party members on the backwood bridge on the first floor of the tower. I had Will's cat lure the enemies with Meow, one by one, to the bridge. Then I went into turn-based mode and had Gale thunderwave them off the edge, killing any that resisted it. We spent almost 2 hours doing that to everyone, including the traders, because I can't ever get anything from them, and everyone else. I held off on freeing the prisoners, and then had the idea to use Command Drop on Karnas to get him to drop the Moon Lantern, which didn't anger him, and then use Mage Hand to throw Moon Lantern down from the tower to another floor where I could get it. For some reason, the Mage Hand throwing the lantern causes everyone to turn on us, and our own Mage Hand is immediately killed. But eventually, we killed everyone in the tower but Ketheric, before slowly dragging the lit Moon Lantern around so that we could leave. I needed to reach level 8 and maybe even level 9 before Ketheric, so I tried to confront the other Thorms and do as many of the big XP fights to get as much XP as possible. I went for the Thorms,
Let's go.
and then took on some of the optional fights before I rested and completely forgot that I need to kill Isobel at last light. I spoke to Arabella only to realize I couldn't complete her quest because she gives me a ring for doing so. And I can't avoid killing Isobel or I am forced to kill the only character that can revive party members, Shadowheart. Now, I thought I would end up killing Shadowheart, but you'll see about that later. So I headed off to confront Isobel. Now, normally, if you kill Isobel, you have to deal with all the Harpers as Shadow-Cursed Undead. There does exist an exploit by polymorphing Isobel, which doesn't despawn her, Marcus, or the Winged Horrors, but I just didn't do that. I sided against Marcus, and then just let Isobel die. Then I kept Jaheira alive during the subsequent fight, and had to return to camp for now. Now I had planned to try and lift the Shadow Curse until I realized the item we needed to wake up Art Cullen was a loot, which was an item. So I let him die in the Shadow Curse. I will realize what this meant much later. I unlocked my Slayer form, which isn't an item, and is a vital way to get some extra HP, because the next section would be very hard. The Gauntlet of Shar. I needed to do 2 things in the Gauntlet of Shar. Number 1, Balthazar needs to be die, because it's going to mess me up if he follows me into the Shadowfell. And 2, I need to reach the Shadowfell without any of the 4 Umbral Gems. I'm sure all of you know how this goes. I used the knock spell to open the door to Balthazar's room, and invisibly opened it, merging the 2 combats. Then I annoyed Balthazar by killing his friends, and then used Sanctuary to just watch as he was decimated by the Shar worshippers. Now you might be wondering, how did he get to the Verge of Shadows? At this point, we had reached level 9, and I had Gale learn Fly, and by standing in this exact spot, a Fly spell allows you to fly down so long as the game is out of turn-based mode, to the entrance. And a knock spell will open the door. So long for useless traps. But that was when the first major blow came. We were about to go in to the Shadowfell when Shadowheart told me we needed to find the Spear of Night in the Silent Library. Because that library has a silence effect, not only would that make the fight incredibly hard, but I couldn't even pick up the spear, because it's an item. You cannot enter the Shadowfell without the Spear of Night. I knew what had to be done. So I had to turn on her, and we dropped her in 1 turn. Now once again, we could not ever revive a character. I also turned on her here, so she wouldn't give me her items if I just went in and did the section without her. I entered the Night Song's prison, faced no resistance, and freed the Night Song. Wait, what is this? Turns out, if you free the Night Song, she gives you the Moonlight Glaive. I tried everything to avoid it, but to no avail. I had just saved too, so this was a soft lock. And with no other options, I did a complete 180 and decided to let Balthazar take the Night Song, which meant a reload almost 2 hours back to when he was alive. But as I was resting, I was visited by Scalaritus Fell, where he told me to kill Isobel, the cleric at Last Light. I genuinely forgot that I reloaded before it, and realized I need to kill her for the Slayer form. I headed over to Last Light and sided against Marcus this time. I had hoped to kill Marcus and everyone else, but one of the Winged Horrors killed Isobel, and doomed the Harpers. This battle was very tedious until I realized they knocked her out because I got the second cutscene with Scalaritus the next night. This would require me to kill Lae'zel, and I just couldn't make the saves to avoid it. Then I ended up losing all my companions as they turned on me. Reload. Second attempt. This one went much better, and the Winged Horrors rolled much lower initiative. Not everything was perfect, though.
Marcus needs to die. Oh, shoot! Oh, God!
It was a big problem when Minthara and everyone else took a lot of damage through Vampiric Shout. Now this might be a good time to mention our secret weapon. Minthara is a sorcerer, and I had her learn Twin Spell for meta magic. I also had her learn Haste, so by using Haste on Astarion, because Wild Shape is a bonus action for him, I can also haste my character as well for 2 extra attacks. And with our twin haste, we eradicate Marcus and most of the Winged Horrors before we let Isobel die to Moonbeam. We kept Jaheira alive so that we could recruit her later, and the battle was so fast against the Harpers that half of the Shadow Creepers didn't even spawn until after the fight was over. I got the Slayer form and then let Balthazar take the Night Song, something I had actually never done before. After killing Shadowheart, unfortunately. Also, if you don't have Shadowheart in your party, she gives you an empty backpack, which would fail the challenge. Now, the game was starting to massively break in a few ways.
Unnerving though it is, the Emperor is the reason we have
Wait, what?
and if the gift princes suffer,
Huh?
the price.
Here, okay. She's not supposed to say that.
And that might be why the UI looks like this. This affects a large portion of the game, and it just starts to break for no reason. So if you see something weird, I have no idea why. So it's probably related to something I've been doing. After we spoke to Ketheric Thorm, we hear a story. A boring story. And then we are told to bow before the altar of the Absolute,
and he gives us the gift of the Absolute. So was this over? Not really. I first tried to bypass the cutscene with invisibility, a box tower, which failed because I couldn't pick any up, a misty step, and everything to bypass the trigger. Nothing worked. Then I did some research into the gift of the Absolute. It turns out the gift of the Absolute never shows up in your inventory because the only time you can get one is after the Dream Guardian cutscene, where the Dream Guardian tells you nom nom on those tadpoles. It's impossible for it to be an item. Bullet dodged for now. After Ketherick took me downstairs to the colony, we had to now defeat Balthazar. The problem was that while in the profane wombs, yes, that's what they are called, we were silenced, so Itemless would basically have to solo this fight. He wasn't alone, however, as Balthazar was accompanied by zombie Dror Ragslin and some reconstituted marksmen and zombies. Even after I freed Astarion and Minthara, the fight still took a while. But we eventually got Will out, and he took out the zombies, and Big Boy Balthazar soon followed. Now we were in the colony, so I did a few small fights to use the only restoration pod, and no, it cannot be added to your inventory, so it is not an item. Ketherick awaited. We watched the Infinity Stones being assembled to command a brain, and then prepared an ambush. I had Will's imp invisibly sneak up and attack an intellect devour to start the fight, by surprising everyone. And then I had Minthara blast all the Necromites with thunder abilities. Itemless butchered a Mind Flayer in one turn. Ketherick was going to be harder. But after freeing Aelin, the fight easily turned in our favor. Then Merkel pops his ultimate and begins annihilating us. That is until Minthara blinds him and Will uses Hunger of Hadar. Merkel is now unable to see or use his ranged abilities, but unfortunately, Will got his concentration broken and Minthara was killed. Because I needed her, I had to reload or I will forever play the game with 3 characters. Second try went much better, and we shredded Merkel in just 4 turns. GG's Simmons. Remember when I said bullet dodged for now? This is now. With Ketherick dead, I needed to pick up his netherstone to leave. Before this challenge, there existed a way for the cutscene to just not play if everyone was in wild shape when Ketherick dies. But because my party cannot become druids because we have no gold, and even though Astarion is a druid and can be in wild shape, if we all died, we could never get revived. And you cannot progress to Act 3 without your main character being alive. So with no way around it, we needed to interact with his corpse, and a cutscene forced us into picking up his netherstone. Now, this hit isn't over yet. As I was about to leave Act 2, I remembered something. Because Art Culla, that forgettable flaming fist, died in Last Light, it occurred to me I could just cast Speak with Dead on him to get all the information I need to lift the curse. No items necessary. I helped Halsin fight off the shadows and then brought him into our party. I spoke to Oliver and then followed him into his boss fight. I had 2 dryads, thanks to having Jaheira and Halsin, that both use spike growth to stop his shadow friends. That leaves the 2 real threats of the boss fight, Mommy and Daddy. Daddy has a high damage area attack to lecture us for not touching grass all year, and Mommy on the other hand can put our characters and summons to sleep because we've been staying up late playing Fortnite. They're also resistant to almost everything but Radiant, and Itemless excels at dealing Radiant damage. Eventually we took out Mommy and Daddy, but Oliver wasn't done yet. He summoned Shadow Plush, an owlbear, and Astarion had a one-on-one owlbear fight. He easily won that fight, by the way. Eventually we took out the enemies and lifted the Shadow Curse. Now we have Lae'zel, Will, Karlach, Gale, Minthara, Astarion, Halsin, and Jaheira. With everything in Act 2 done that I wanted to do, I headed out of the Shadow Curse land and watched the sun rise on a grateful land. We took a long rest, and surprise, some Gith raiders are here to attack us. Even though Itemless is also a monk, he got quickly put in his place when a key resonation blast on the monks did absolutely nothing. We barely managed to reach the portal alive, but eventually we entered the Astral Prism. Fighting Githyanki monks was incredibly rough, especially since they basically cannot miss because of our low armor class, and deal large amounts of damage because of how high the difficulty is. What did we do? Well, we just pushed them off with skills and spells into space, which is known for its high gravitational pull and death barrier. Once we entered where the real fun was happening, we encountered some Gith and a Mind Flayer also attempting Itemless. Or maybe not. Turns out the leader of the Gith had boots, which failed the challenge, so we attacked them because they used an item. After the battle was over, we had a problem. The Emperor wants us to evolve, and because I couldn't pick up any items, I couldn't refuse to do it. Because I would receive the tadpole in my inventory, even though I had consumed none. I reloaded saves and tried some of the different options to see if it showed up in our inventory. It turns out, if you eat the tadpole, no one else can use it, so it doesn't show up in your inventory. Down the hatch it goes. More on that later. Now let's begin. Once we reached Act 3, the mission was simple. Gather as many allies as possible for the final confrontation. Now because I forgot to save Roland, killed Counselor Floric and the Strange Ox, because all three are tied to rewards, we couldn't get them as allies. I also couldn't use invisibility potions to sneak past the fights, so I would be forced to get as many allies as possible because these fights in the endgame are tough when you have no items. Because Isobel was killed, that left us with 13 allies that could be recruited, one of which we already had, Halsin. But first, we needed a lot of XP to reach level 12. I slaughtered some thieves to hit level 10, where I decided to multi-class Itemless into a rogue to get that extra bonus action at rogue level 3. I investigated a murder, killed a clown, and met my darling sister Orin. We are the Dark Urge, and you must be the Dark Urge to beat the game without manually picking up an item. We had consumed the Astral Touch Tadpole, which allowed us to get Black Hole, a massive spell to slow enemies, which greatly improved our chances of survival. Though we were way too confident approaching two warring factions, and without armor, they annihilated us. I needed to get into the city, and because I had freed the Iron Hand Gnomes, they helped us get in. We couldn't accept their quest, however. This is where the problems began. A great number of these quests to get allies required items to progress them. This immediately takes out Astarian's quest and the Gur allies because this is our signet ring that must be inserted to progress the questline. The other problem is the Netherstones. We need all of them to progress. We enter Worm's Rock by just flying across the gap. Then we speak with Gortash and agree to ally with him. One thing that is important is that we don't talk to Mizora before leaving for the lower city. Our first ally is Auntie Ethel, so we need to immediately backtrack and kill Laura, who's at the Flaming Fist barracks. The problem with attacking Laura is that we also have to fight two very strong Flaming Fists. We killed some baldurs to get fresh corpses with the druids to animate zombies, to prepare for that fight. I had Minthara cast Heightened Hold Person on all three of them, and we finished them off. I went to speak with Ethel, who becomes our second ally after we let her keep Vanra. What's important is that if you accept Ethel's quest and then kill Laura, she gives you gold, so you need to kill Laura first to avoid that reward. I elected to deal with Orin immediately, because it would be really bad if she showed up in our camp. In order to do that, I wanted to take on Saravok. Why? Because Investigator Valeria needs to be saved so I can get her as an ally, and killing her will cause Saravok to give us the Amulet of Baal, which is an item. I stopped the murderer and read the note to obtain the passphrase to enter. But because I couldn't pick up the hands, I realized I would have to fight the Death Knights to enter, and they are paladins. Paladins suck. I also forgot I didn't even need to confront Saravok because I was the Dark Urge. I could just enter the Temple of Baal. I was heading that direction to unlock the waypoint when Lae'zel showed up in her underwear, claiming Orin had captured her. Surprise, it's actually Orin. She tells us to kill Gortash and then gives us an empty backpack. Reload. I added Lae'zel to my party instead of Minthara. Then I approached the Undercity and Orin is Minthara, and she gives us her backpack that you did not have before this. Remember when I said this? Now we have Lae'zel, Will, Karlach, Gale, Minthara, Astarian, Halsin, and Jaheira. Well, that was a lie. It turns out if you don't give Gale magic items, which I did not, he leaves. Because he has no items, he'll just leave.
Since he's a companion that can be kidnapped, and I have the other 3 capturable companions, this means I would have been permanently soft-locked if he had not left, only able to progress after picking up the empty backpack. Gale had become a hero for leaving, but for every hero, there's a villain, and the villain was the Traveler's chest in our camp. Now, patch 6 broke a lot of the Baldur's Gate 3 mods, so I removed all of them before starting the runs, but forgot to remove the mod fixer and script extenders. That's the reason the UI looks like this, and the Traveler's chest is the true villain. Any item you send to camp will be soft-locked there, and you just cannot open it. It's going to be very important later. I triggered the Orin cutscene without any kidnappable companions in my party, and the orphan girl Yenna ran up to talk to us, but we don't care about her because she doesn't give us a backpack. Then we backtracked to Saravok and lured his Death Knight guards into a corner. We casted Create Water to wet them, and then used Ice and Lightning spells to deal massive damage to them as they are vulnerable to that damage. Eventually, they did get some big hits on me after they were no longer surprised, but we took them down before approaching Saravok. Because we were the Dark Urge and obtained our Slayer form, we could just proceed straight to the abattoir. But once Saravok began moving, we immediately hold person him. Because his other allies are just in another room, Saravok was here, paralyzed, and we could just wail on him. It took a couple turns until we took him down, but the Echoes noticed he was dead and attacked us with some pretty powerful abilities. Eventually, they go down as well, and we get Investigator Valeria as an ally. Now, it's time for Orin. But before I went down there, I wanted to drop Ketheric's Netherstone. I dropped it right here, where I proceeded to forget about it. We descended into the Baal Temple. Because we were the Dark Urge, we could just enter the Temple of Baal. Now, given I was the Dark Urge, I needed to take down Orin, but I was only level 11, and if we got forced into a duel, Orin would easily defeat me, if we fought fair. But do you really expect me to fight fair? Come on. No. The next ally I had in mind was Dame Aelin. We headed to Sorcerer's Sundries and decided that Lorcan should learn how to fly. We used Meow and Minor Illusion to lure him to the edge, and Eldritch blasted Lorcan to his death. He doesn't prepare Featherfall, that's on him. The Myrmidons were, understandably, not happy, and pretty powerful. Some key resonation blasts and spells were enough to wipe them out. For some reason, Aelin still did not join us. I have no idea why. So I positioned my party on a ledge far away from Orin, then initiated the fight before I got forced into the duel, by attacking mid-cutscene. I had my characters use ranged attacks with spells to slowly take out her guards. Then I had Halsin use Cloud Kill on Orin. For whatever reason, if Orin started her turn in the Cloud Kill, her unstoppable charges don't reduce the damage, even though she is granted a dozen per turn. So long as no one has a clear line of sight to attack us, we can just keep replacing the Cloud Kill. It took us over 25 rounds of combat, but eventually we took out the last of Orin's troops, and eventually, Orin herself. Now, I wanted to be a redemption Dark Urge, so I could have Jaheira as an ally. But when I refused Baal's Blessing, I realized the cutscene doesn't force me into picking up the item that I need, Orin's Netherstone. With no way to get it without picking it up willingly, I had to accept Baal's Blessing, because that cutscene made us pick up the Netherstone without being able to stop it. We immediately ditched the dagger, and we have a second Netherstone, just like that. Now, I hadn't had the opportunity to partial rest since the fight, and I wouldn't get one, because in order to leave, I need to defeat Jaheira and the Harper she brought with her. Now, normally we have a few Baal cultists that emerge to help us, but 2 of them just refused to come out. So I used Minor Illusion to lure some of the other Baalists outside the temple door, but they refused to attack the Harpers. Now, most of them were not a problem, and the wolf they summoned was just stuck there, but Captain Leaf Song and Jaheira were the biggest problems. I did level up Jaheira, and because I could not respec her to level 1, she has all the HP and benefits of level 10. Thankfully, she also had very few spell slots because partial resting doesn't give you any, which allowed us to take her out. The rest put up a good fight, but eventually we took them out. We now had Baal as an ally. We eventually hit level 12, where my 3rd rogue level gave me an additional bonus action and gave the rest of my party more constitution. I wanted to disable the Steel Watch next to get 2 more allies, but this is where I made the mistake that would cost me the run. I convinced Red Hammer to take us to the Iron Throne so I could save Duke Ravengard. I only needed Obelia Tubin alive, so I immediately headed for the security wing, only to find that Ravengard was dead? I had no choice but to leave him behind and head to the Steel Watch Foundry. I knew I could not get past all the Steel Watchers and the Steel Watcher Titan, but the first fight, I needed to have Xander Tubin die so that I can speak with Dead on him to get the code to destroy the Steel Watch. And the rest was going to be up to Lae'zel. I leveled Lae'zel up as a wizard for spells like Invisibility and Knock, which were spells Gale had before he vanished. I had Lae'zel cast Invisibility and sneak past the second group of Bay Knights and 2 Hellfire Watchers, and cast Knock on the door to the control center, which did start combat, but all the enemies just spent their turns dashing to her, and I had Lae'zel walk through the door and recast Invisibility on herself to sneak past the rest of the Steel Watchers. We input the code to blow up the Steel Foundry, sky high. How did the other Bay Knights not know that I just went to the Neuroster? I don't know. With that, Wilburn congratulates us and joins our camp alliance. I wanted to take on Raphael as well, but the problem was, I'm not sure how to get there. The very first step is the ritual pouch. Halsik will give it to us if we negotiate with her, and pickpocketing it is not an option. So we are forced to cast Hold Person on her and beat her to death without entering combat. Then we can drag the pouch slowly up the room, destroy it, and drag the components around the circle, and open the portal to the House of Hope. But then I ran into a massive problem. To initiate the fight against Raphael, I need to steal the hammer or destroy the contract, both of which would involve me picking up the Orphic Hammer. Or would it? If I wanted to get Yrgir on my team, I would need to get into the House of Hope having signed the contract. Maybe there was a way to sign the contract without getting the hammer. Now this exploit or glitch I'm about to show you gets really crazy. I had my character kill Lae'zel, she disapproved of that, and had Karlach summon a bear companion to reduce me to a very low amount of health. Killing Lae'zel allowed me to switch between characters to summons during the Raphael cutscene. Then, while I was in the cutscene, I attacked Raphael and my character with Karlach's bear after accepting his deal. Attacking Raphael didn't work because he just teleported away, but for some reason killing my character while in the cutscene just caused me not to get the hammer. The game said I had the hammer, but it just was not in my inventory. I don't know if this was a bug or something to do with the fact that my game was absolutely starting to fall apart at the seams. To confirm it wasn't a one-time thing, I tried it again, and it worked again. The journal even said that we had what we needed to enter the House of Hope, but the hammer's just gone. I didn't need the hammer, I just needed the contract. Because if you destroy the contract, you don't actually get it. And that's a way to avoid picking up an item. Now that we could enter the House of Hope to destroy our contract, to trigger the Raphael fight. But because the hammer was gone, that meant I could not save Hope, which would make that fight so much harder. We took on Harleb, read Raphael's journal without picking it up, and headed into the archives. We cleared the House of Hope of its debtors and devils that occupied it. We used the fountain, which cannot be added to your inventory, and then destroyed our contract. We proceeded to head straight out of the House of Hope after all the summons and buff spells we had. We headed to the portal room only for Hope to close and lock the door. None of my characters have knock, and because thieves' tools are an item, we had to reload our save 3 hours back and bring Lae'zel into our party to open the locked door. So long, Hope, but you brought that on yourself. I passed the check to get Yrgir as an ally, and the battle began. We desperately needed to destroy the soul pillars, because no items means no damage reduction, and he hits like a truck when he uses spells. The other Cambions have rays of fire, and we have AC so low that they almost hit every single one of those rays. So these Cambions needed to die. One by one, the soul pillars fell, so I used Black Hole to group all of the Cambions up and keep Resonation Strikes to whittle them down. But Yrgir was the MVP, using Thunderous Blast and daggers to keep the others busy. Raphael used Incinerate to destroy 3 of my summons. Eventually, he turned into the Ascended Fiend and used a Fireball to destroy an additional 5 of my summons. The Cambions eventually went down, and Raphael 5 rounds later. You put up a good fight. It's time for Gortash. On my way to Worm's Rock, I remembered Mizora was still there. Curious as to why, I talked to her, and she revealed she had an offer which involved Duke Ravengard. To my surprise, Mizora offered the same deal, only she would raise Ravengard from the dead if Will agreed. That gave us 2 allies, because of course I had Will agree. I mean, why wouldn't I? We fought some flaming fists and snuck our way into Worm's Rock. We reached Gortash, and for some reason he didn't acknowledge that we destroyed his steel watch, probably because the game is falling apart at the seams, but still refuses our alliance because we lack Ketheric's nether stone. Thankfully, I planned ahead and positioned everyone else outside. Then I lured Gortash outside, as I knew just killing him wouldn't work, as I needed to pick up the gauntlet to progress. So I positioned my fungal zombies near the edge, and according to my plan, Gortash ran very close to the edge, and a thunder wave blasted him into the chasm. After the fight ended, we expected to get a cutscene where I got the nether stone, but then it happened. We saw Gortash's gauntlet on the floor. This needed to be picked up to get the stone. The nether stone wouldn't count, but the gauntlet would. I panicked and reloaded to look for Ketheric's stone. Then I remembered about the traveler's chest. The goddamn traveler's chest. I thought I knew that the stone was in there, probably because I sent it to camp. I looked at the Baldur's Gate 3 Discord in sheer panic and asked for help. I had no idea what was going on. Then someone asked me, "Are you using mods?" Now, before the run, I had made sure to remove all of the mods I had. What I completely forgot was the supplemental ones, like Mod Fixer, Script Extenders, and Improved UI. Some weird combination of those was causing every exploit or glitch you saw in the run to happen. To prove this, I tested the Raphael exploit afterwards, and it gave me the hammer. I removed all of these mods, and now I can see my character portraits. The UI health works. I can open up the Traveler's chat. Oh, it's not even in there. I genuinely panicked and spent hours going through all the recordings to try and find out when and where I dropped Ketheric's stone. Eventually, I realized it was right where I left it, over 12 hours ago. Now that I knew where Ketheric's stone was, I reloaded back almost 10 hours, siding with Gortash before taking out the steel watch. After those 10 hours of redoing everything I had done in the past 10 hours, there's only one fight standing between me and Itemless being beaten. Sort of. I headed to the Morphic pool and met Gortash, only for him to die and me having to pass a DC 99 check that I actually passed. We gathered our ally and prepared to fight. The one problem was, no items means no invisibility potions to sneak past. I also had to relinquish the stones to the Emperor because he would have to use them, and we can't use items either. We made our way through the sewers and took on the Death Knight mini-boss. We had Itemless fly to past the gauntlet and make it to the brain. We climbed the brain, but the brain wasn't done. The brain summoned 4 counter-aberrations of us, 2 of which were druids, rogue, and a sorcerer, all of which were way stronger than us. Thankfully, we could call for backup. And this horn does not show up in our inventory, so it's fine. No idea where we got it from, lol. We had the Emperor beeline it to the crown and cast a spell to open the portal. We used every spell and attack we had to hold them off, but it wasn't always easy. Once we entered the brain, we had a massive problem. The brain has a massive AoE attack, and we were low on health. We used every spell or attack or fist we could and finished off the brain with Itemless's one and only power word kill from accepting Baal's blessing. Now, did I beat Baldur's Gate 3 Itemless? Sort of. You see, no matter what you do besides the Netherstones, you will be forced into one item, the Deathstalker Mantle or the Amulet of Baal. You cannot win without picking up one of them willingly. However, you can win without using any single item. I went through and tested, looking through all the recordings, and not a single time did I willingly use an item. So in spite of the fact that I never used any of them, I'll still make the solo challenge run series. Now before I end, I need to explain a few things that you guys have commented about, that I wanted to talk about. Now when I mentioned this was on the hardest difficulty, back in Acts 1 and 2, that was because I had made the script for them before when Honor Mode came out. I was focusing on that for my old channel, but then Pal World came out, so I spent many months working on that video. So Acts 1 and 2 were recorded before that. I've also been busy with college. Thank you so much for supporting the series. I want to thank all 350 of you wonderful people and the 85% who haven't subscribed yet. Make sure to like the video and comment your thoughts. Thanks for the massive support. See you in the next video.